Oh, yes. Someone asked, by the way, I saw something that I meant to respond to. So I'm glad you reminded me about takana and tikkun being the same root. And yes, they are the same root. Tikkun and takana are the same root because tikkun is to fix something. And takana is something that is fixed, right? It's not the exact translation, but it's basically something that is fixing a situation. So yes, it is from the same root. Okay. Other questions? If someone wants to...
I wanted to ask something with the story when he stood outside the prison and there was a child inside and he started to say part of a pasuk and he responded, they bring down that he saw that he was going to be a Talmid Chacham. But when you talk about being lost to Judaism, after the Holocaust, there were people who would go into different monasteries and nunneries in Europe, and they would start to say Shema, and they would hear which kids answered them. And that's how they would pick up a lot of these lost kids that had been hidden for maybe, 4 years from the age of maybe 5, when they were just starting to maybe learn Kriya Shema Hamita. And now they were maybe 10 and they were integrated with the non-Jewish children. So I'm wondering if maybe that played into it, that he was trying to save Nefashot. He was standing outside that prison, and that was just a test to see whether this child who turned out to be Rabbi,
right? It could be, but I think in this case he knew who it was. He knew this was a Jewish child, so it doesn't seem to me. Even though I think the comparison, bringing that up, is very interesting in the context of this, but I don't think that was the situation here. I think it was pretty clear that they were sending him on a mission to deal with this child that was there.
So, in getting back, is it the case that to save someone from being forced into assimilation, there's a different halacha or a different permissibility to redeem children?
So according to Tosfot, he definitely thinks so. According to the Ramban, not really. The Ramban thinks that all captivity has all those dangers, that they might make you become not Jewish. They might make you, they might murder you. They might rape you. And he said, and it still tells us we can't. So he seems pretty adamant, which is very interesting. But according to Tosfot, you would come to that conclusion. This is where you have different opinions. It's part of what it's all about.
Thank you.
Viewpoints, which again, in this kind of situation, it really might be influenced by what was going on in their time. Definitely is possible. Yes.
Can you just explain what the Mishnah was saying about, and in the case of a priestess, was it talking about?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that's someone, there's an issue. Someone who's married to a Kohen, this is actually a really complicated, very complicated.
Married to one, so I love hearing the
So you don't want to hear this part. Someone's married to a Kohen and she gets raped, then she can't actually be married to him anymore. Okay. It's like a problem. And as we're normal, if it happens to a regular woman, she can go back and be married to her husband because she didn't do it right. But let's start with somebody is an adulteress. Okay. She sleeps with someone else on purpose. Then she can't go back. It's called asur laboel v'asur laboel. She's forbidden to her husband and she's forbidden to the one she has relations with. Okay. It's basically punishing, right? You don't get anything. But if she's married if she gets raped, then it's obviously not her fault and she can. But a Kohen is not allowed to be married to someone who is a zonah. And basically, I think whether they put her in the category of a zonah, I forget exactly where it comes from, but it's basically an issue. So that's why it said there, I have to just look at what it said. I wasn't focused on this when I was preparing, but it's that, I just want to find it. Kohenet, ahadrinach lemedinatech. I promise to return you to your country, but not back to me, because he's not allowed to, because there's an assumption that if a woman was taken captive, you have to assume that she was raped. And then he basically can't stay married to her. It's a horrible situation. There's a lot of difficult issues with Kohanim and wives of Kohanim.
There are some loopholes with that.
Yeah. You want to share them, or?
I just know it's the way she asks or the way she tells what had happened to her.
Uh-huh.
More than that, I can't tell you because I don't know.
Okay.
Enough, but
okay. Yeah. I'm sure they make some, but that's the basic halacha bit,
So do they do anything about that today? Because otherwise what's going to happen is the woman who's married to a Kohen will not report her rape.
Right. It's true. Yeah. So I don't know exactly, practically speaking, how this manifests itself. But like base halacha, it would be, it's a problem, basically. Now, there's two things. One is if she was actually raped. The other, that I didn't see who was talking, but I'm having trouble. I need to put my view on differently. But the idea is that that if she was taken captive, the question is, can you assume necessarily that she was raped or not? If she's actually raped, it becomes more of an issue. I don't know how, if there's ways around it. But it's complicated. Yeah.
Terrible.
Okay. Other questions on lighter topics?
Is there a hierarchy as to who's more valuable in terms of the child that became Rav Yishmael, and that his life in this context seems that his life had more value than if he was just another adorable kid, Jewish kid taken captive? Is there a conclusion here? Would you say it's geared to any particular situation?
Right. It's a good question. I didn't look up with the commentaries, like the more, later commentaries, to see if they actually rule that one can do this. But definitely, if you take Tosfot seriously, Tosfot, one of his answers are Chacham Muflag, that a real Talmid Chacham, yes. Now, the question is the child, how you would know. But obviously they knew, they saw something in this child already. I mean, even the way the description, even though they described the child in terms of his physical beauty, but clearly people were impressed with this child in general. And that's why they singled him out to begin with. So again, as I said, you're getting into a very tricky realm at that point, because how do you value someone's life over another? And it's very tricky and very complicated. I don't know how we actually rule, if this is taken into consideration or not. So as I said, the Maharam Rubenberg wasn't willing to allow that to happen, even though he was clearly a Chacham Muflag. And he just wouldn't allow it to happen. So maybe he was nervous about doing this also. They don't suggest it. The suggestions, they said, well, maybe he didn't value himself enough, or he was worried they would take all the Torah scholars, but maybe he also felt like, who am I to say my life is worth more? And maybe he didn't like that whole approach. So it's a possibility. Wow. A lot of things you'll see, there's no real clarity about these things. And that's what's interesting about learning Gemara, which I like, because on the one hand, you want to have clarity. Okay, so what's the story? But on the other hand, it shows that there's also, especially an issue like this, which is complicated, there's all sorts of things weighing on you. This pulls you in one direction, but on the other hand, you have to think about everything. You can't just say, oh, black and white answer, right? It's clearly not black and white. This is a very complicated issue. So. Okay. Thank you all for coming. To be continued
so
next
much,
week.
Michelle. Wonderful course.
Great learning together.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for going to the other rooms as well. That was nice.
Amazing.
Thank you.